There we go. Hello, You Aligned community. And if you're watching this in another venue, we recorded this for the You Aligned community on Facebook, and we invite you to come over there. I will be adding a link in the comments for that if you are viewing this outside of Facebook. I would love to talk a little bit more about people pleasing, because this is something that the women who come to me are dealing with. They are saying yes to all the people in their life except for themselves, and they are doing it at the expense of themselves. And the thing that always strikes me is they think that there is something wrong with them. And I want to dispel that myth right away and talk with Catherine a little bit more about that, because I don't think there's anything wrong with you. I think you formed a coping pattern, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. If you are not familiar with who I am or who Catherine is, I am a life coach, and I work with women who are breaking through the pattern of being all things to all people, because they are so exhausted of being all things to all people. And we talk about the patterns that have created that exhaustion, how we can break those patterns and create new patterns. And then also along with that, really say yes to your dreams and create time freedom and financial freedom in your life, because really that is the key to really being authentically you and being aligned with who you are. So it's a process of saying yes to who you are, yes to what you value, and then living your life that way. I met Catherine through a coaching group that we're both a part of, and I just really value what she brings to the table, and I'm going to let her introduce herself right now. Hey, Catherine.
Hello. Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this talk.
Yes.
Yes, it's going to be amazing, and I love everything you've said already. So just a quick introduction. I probably don't need to add too much more, but I'm Catherine Blackwood. I work with highly sensitive women, coaching and therapy. Mainly women going through a life-changing event, but also it's the key pattern that keeps coming up is about relationships. And so obviously people pleasing is a relationship issue, because you kind of don't do it, and that's part of the problem. We don't please ourselves. It's always like, who can I serve, who can I serve, who can I rescue, who can I fix? So and when you're highly sensitive, there is this you notice so much, your environment's so rich, so you spot opportunities to help people, you're empathic, so you see where people are in need, and you know, but so it can be a natural tendency to want to be helpful, but also when it becomes detrimental to yourself and to your relationships, that's when it becomes like people pleasing. So I'm really excited to dive into how we can just help you all to actually reclaim a little bit of yourself and relax.
I love that. Reclaim and relax. Those are two great words right there. And I love that you bring in the sensitivity piece and empathy and being an empath, because that is something that I personally have a challenge with sometimes, because I am sensing all of the energy around me and how I can manage that for other people. And I think that's the first thing I want anyone watching to understand, is this is about managing the energy around you. We think it's about connection and service, and then we go into the negative side of it and think, oh, I'm just a doormat, I clean up other people's messes. But the reality is that something happened really early on in your life that led you to believe, if you can shape shift enough, or if you can be all things to all people, then you're going to have belonging, acceptance, safety. You won't be rejected. You will feel loved, all of that. And so it's a pattern that's created without your conscious agreement to it, because you're too young to do that. And for me personally, it was created by a narcissistic relationship in my young life, that, you know, an adult who had influence over me was emotionally demanding, and I was always trying to navigate that and go, okay, what can I do differently so that that person doesn't explode anymore, so that person isn't unhappy anymore. And when you are a child, you have no control over that. And I also think, and I wonder if you have seen this a lot too in your work, Catherine, is as women, we are naturally trained to be of service to others, and that is a virtuous thing. And I'm not saying it's not a virtuous thing, it definitely is. But do you do it from a place of alignment and choice, and you're conscious about who you're serving and why? Or are you doing it because you have this pattern and this was modeled for you, that you give and give and give until you drop? And somehow that makes you more acceptable as a person. What have you noticed that with women in general?
Yeah, I think it's a culture-wide problem, as well as an individual problem. So even a child who's had the best upbringing, best childhood, the best opportunities, had a voice, and was given the space to grow, they enter the world and all these expectations on women, that I think that does fuel it. So there is something to be said there. Women are naturally very nurturing, and we want to feel good about that side of ourselves, but obviously, depending on where you've come from, you don't even know that someone's taken advantage of you. It's like we were saying before this call, you're just the fish in your water. That's all you've ever known. And it's not really until you can have these conversations as an adult. A child would never grasp this concept, but it's in adulthood that we can really actually put it under the magnifying glass and see what's going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have really come to understand it about myself too, because I have fought against this. And I think this might be true for quite a few women who are watching. I have fought against this label of people pleasing for myself, because I feel like in most areas of my life, I'm able to say, nope, this is what I want. This is how I want it. I'm very direct. I'm very much a leader, and I can just, allow things to unfold based on my leadership. And it's not so much about trying to shape shift and try to please other people. And so I've really struggled with, like, am I a people pleaser? Am I not a people pleaser? Like, what is going on there? And you broke something wide open for me that I have been, like, literally within the last couple of days when you shared this with me, I am still letting it marinate, because I can't even believe I didn't recognize this before, but it's so empowering to recognize it. And what you said to me was, there are people who get caught up in people pleasing that don't normally, like, that's not the pattern they normally do, but they have that people pleasing attached to one person in their life. Or, in my case, it was one in my childhood, one in my adulthood. And I repeated the pattern. And a lot of times these are people, I think you mentioned this, that, they fit into the category of narcissistic in their personality. So we're not diagnosing anybody here, anything like that. And we're not going to go deep into narcissism. But for me, that was my experience, to have someone who was participating in the raising of me and very much could be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And then in my adulthood, not recognizing that I had another narcissist in my life. And because of the difference between, like, an overt kind of angry in your face narcissist, but then also a covert vulnerable one in my adulthood. And to see the people pleasing pattern come out, that was what came out first in this new relationship. And I was like, what is going on here? And so when you said, well, sometimes that people pleasing is attached to a specific person, I was thinking it's also attached to a certain energy that people give off. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about that, because, like I said, for me, I'm just starting to wrap my head around this.
Yeah. And it's something I don't think I've read it anywhere. Just like it, I sit and ponder things, and it occurred to me that where I've done people pleasing, I mean, I'm a people pleasing pro, so I feel like I can speak as a therapist and coach, and as someone who's been through it myself. Again, difficult childhood, lots of punishment and lots of having to, you know, stay ahead of the game, make sure the path is clear, you know, check that, is there anything I can do? And it was, again, after I'd done all this work on myself, I mean, I've been a therapist for over 20 years now. Coaching was more sort of a recent last few years thing, but in the therapy, I had to go through my own therapeutic journey. And so a lot of that got cleared up, but there was still there was one person, and I'm obviously not going to mention any names, but this person brought that out in me. Even though I'd done all this work, there was this one person that I thought, I want to try hard, like I wanted to do it. And it had echoes, you know, but I didn't quite realize it. But you get drawn to these people because there is a similarity. I mean, you know, it could be that it's covert and therefore it's not as obvious. And it's almost much more seductive. If you're a bit of a rescuer, which I have been in the past, it's just like, you know, it's such a good match, a good fit. And yeah, so then you're just in this, it's enmeshed, I guess, codependent. But yeah, you just don't realize it, because with everybody else you feel like, you know, I know how to say no, I know how to manage myself, my time, my energy and everything. And then there's this one person, it's almost like you want to do it. And so it's definitely still feeding something. It's feeding the shadow, where you haven't quite got to the point where you're ready to say, I don't need to see myself that way anymore. And it really isn't even about the other person. I mean, quite often they have to leave your life, or they have to be put behind a really strong boundary. But as you know, the work begins within first. It's just recognizing it. And it's so hard to recognize it if it's just the one person, you know. People are like, oh yeah, I people please with everyone. They'll be the ones first to put their hands up. Yeah, I'm a people pleaser, you know. But when it's your boss, or it's your partner, or it's your best friend, you don't kind of see it that way. You just think it's a special relationship where you just put in that extra bit of effort.
Yes. Oh, that you just hit. Okay. So you just hit on two things that I want to highlight. One, you said rescuer. And what's clicking for me is, okay, so maybe I didn't call it people pleasing behavior, but I am a rescuer in everything I do. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. So I have a plan for everything. I fix everything. I come in and with this energy of justice and like, I'm going to make this situation right. And that's rescuing. And to me, when you're talking, it's like, that's a form of people pleasing, because it's always sacrificing myself for the good of another person. And then you also say, well, and I should say, you perfectly described my childhood. That was exactly like always trying to be ahead of the game, always trying to anticipate what was going to happen. And so I think it's really important for women listening to understand it's a nuanced kind of people pleasing. And this is why it's a pattern. It's not who you are. It's a pattern of survival that you needed to create. And it might come in the form of rescuing. It might come in the form of the fawning. It's going back to the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And so when you're caught up in fear, for me, I'm a fighter for the most part. And that's the rescuer energy right there. And what I hear you describing, and you can tell me if I'm accurate or not, it's more of a fawning energy when it's true, what we call people pleasing. It's more of a, how can I be of service? Yes, please, 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 please. And then the other thing that you said right there at the end, oh, I'm totally losing it right now. What did you say right at the end?
I was saying, oh, I'll just try harder. I think that's where you picked up that. Yeah, I'll just try harder. I'm gonna put more into this, like a voluntary.
Exactly. And that gets so, this is what it's coming back to me now. It gets so much more complex in our adulthood because I can volunteer for this. I can say yes to this. I can do this. And then you also said, but this is a special relationship. And I think that is so key right there too, because it's like, oh yeah, okay, you know, I'm married to this person, I'm on a mission with this person, they're my best friend, we're creating this in the world as they're my boss or my employer. And the reality is you have to step back. This is where I work with women in my program to have them step back and look at their relationships and decide, is that person giving mutually into the relationship? And so often we attach the historical or the biological connection, and we base our giving on that, instead of like, is this person actually giving into the relationship as well? And I think that's a key way for women to identify, is this actually a healthy relationship, even though this person is my husband, even though this person is my best friend, even though this person is my partner in life or business, whatever that special connection is, could be a sibling, it could be an adult parent that they're still struggling with that dynamic of always wanting to please their parent. That to me is a key way to identify, like, where is it coming from? Because if you're not mutually being given back to, it's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to see where, if it's balanced. I mean, we're not talking about, every day you've done 50-50. It's, you can lean into someone's in need, and you can sort of, then you can, but if you realize, oh, I never ask anything of this person, I want to be the one to, to help them, or they want me to be the one to help them, or, whatever it is, if it's a one-way energy sort of drain. But I think another way that might help you identify it is if you get a little bit defensive about it. If someone tries to say, you're really happy with, what you're doing, and oh yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, don't you dare like criticize this relationship, because you start to protect it. It can be like you cling to these things until you're really, really ready to see it and to let go of it. So the defensive can be a sign. Like if you're getting triggered about when people mention it, that's always a time to have a little look at it as well.
I really, I resonate with that a lot. So, you talked about the one person connection, but also one of the other things you said to me was, if it's kind of all people that you're trying to please, this other interesting thing can happen. Can you share a little bit about that you shared with me?
Yeah, I would say that someone who acknowledges they're a people pleaser across the board, I'm always there to sort of see what I can do to help, and they're aware that they have this sort of compulsion to do it. Maybe another blind spot. I love finding blind spots, but it can be, and I'll use the example of children. It's just the easiest way to explain it. But I've seen so many people, and I've been guilty of this myself, and it feels horrible to say it, but I'm not going to judge myself, because, you can't come into awareness if you're just ready with a bat to beat yourself over the head with it. But what can happen is that you can be such a people pleaser. It's so important to you to maintain this sort of front. I call it like publicly polished, I'm publicly polished.
Yeah, and that's a great word.
Right. So then you get home and there's these children who love you unconditionally, and you feel totally secure in that relationship. You don't have to people please with your own children, and they end up being the ones who are neglected, because you've spent all day giving your energy to other people, and you get home like, oh, and then your child says, oh, will you play this game with me? No, I can't. Why does everyone want so much from me? That kind of thing. And because you've just given so much, and then that resentment starts to boil, and the only people you're comfortable to say it with, it could be your child, it could be your partner, it could be a close friend, but it's this person who doesn't get the best of you because you just overlook them. I mean, you could be so busy, having to people please, and then your child's saying, mummy, no, not now, I'm talking, don't interrupt. And you pass it on as well. There's this thing of like, they're watching you all the time, it's more like what you do than what you say, and they see you people pleasing, and they see you putting other people before them, and then that's how they learn what value attention has. When someone can occupy your attention in this like manic kind of pleasing activity. So I just think that's another thing to watch out for. If you recognize that you do it through and through, is there one person you feel really comfortable with? And this, again, it's not to shame you, but it's to get you to connect with what it means to be in a comfortable relationship. Yes. It might be your children, it might be you might be fortunate that it is your partner and you can come home at the end of the day, oh my God, you know, and they're there for you. But that, I think, is the key to start really valuing and honoring a really intimate relationship, that you have the intimacy, that you can just be yourself, but don't take advantage of that and don't overlook the gift of it. So yeah, that was what I wanted to say about that.
Absolutely. That is also just a very light bulb moment of like, okay, so when the shit hits the fan, like, who do I dump on? Who do I ignore? Who do I really neglect during that time? And I think that's a good like warning sign to start saying, wait, who am I giving the best of my energy to? And I don't have any best of my energy to give to the people that really, really matter.
Yeah, it's sad, but it's worth recognizing, because then you can start to reclaim the relationships that really matter, because the ones, and this will lead on to my third point, the ones that you're people pleasing with are not the most genuine relationships.
Right.
So if you want me to.
And I think, you know, I think it's so important to recognize that because this is a pattern, we're not bringing consciousness to it, but we also are trying to get something from this pattern that we're not getting it, essentially. So share a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve when you are caught in I alluded to the fact that it was a survival skill, but it's no longer a survival skill if the person that you were trying to shapeshift for is not a dominant person in your life anymore. And so if you're doing this as a pattern in your life in general, what are you trying to achieve and what is not actually happening?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you might have fallen into, like we said with the first point, you might have fallen into a pattern where you're having to do it with somebody else. And that can be, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, you have to tread carefully. You can't just throw your toys out the pram and say, I'm not doing this anymore. And, you know, and you do have to be very careful. But when we're talking about it's just become a sort of habit, you know, you don't even know you're doing it. And the more you do it, the more people expect it of you, so you just get caught up in this cycle. And that's the good news, is that once it's become a habit, you can kind of attack it from the outside in. You know, often the work we have to do is a lot of deep inner work. But this third point I want to make is, again, it's not to shame anyone, but it is about facing reality. And as an adult, you have the capacity to do that. And that is where your power lies. If you can be honest with yourself and say, I've been trying to please people so that they will admire me, that they will appreciate me, that, you know, they'll think I'm wonderful. Sorry, but the truth is probably far from that. The truth is probably that they're beginning to find it a bit irritating. It depends on the person, really, because if they don't want that from you, if they want a genuine relationship from you and you're not giving them that because actually you're just you're kind of smothering in a way, right? So then they're going to either withdraw, and then you're not getting that connection that you wanted, you're not getting that feeling of safety that you wanted, and then you try harder and obviously it perpetuates. Or you could be unlucky and it could be someone who decides, oh, okay, I'm going to exploit this, here we have a weak one, you know, I will just take whatever they've got to give because it makes my life easier. I don't have to like them, you know, but they think I like them because then I'll get more from them. And so, I mean, how awful to put pour all of yourself into this relationship only for it to become the most toxic relationship as opposed to a genuine one. So you're doing yourself a disservice. Another thing is that you won't know, because you're not really being genuine, you won't know if they were even trying to like you, you know. It is a barrier. I'm just going to say it. It's actually a manipulative behavior. And I say manipulative because when you're a child, you don't have power. So all you can do is try and control. True power doesn't need to control. It's like the shadow of power is to need to control. And when you're a minor, or when you don't have a lot of strength, shall we say, and especially as women, we tend to realize that we don't have quite the same strengths, and so we resort to manipulation, you know, and we tend to be very good with emotions. We can read emotions, and so there's so many opportunities to manipulate in a sort of passive aggressive way, maybe, or just passively. So yeah, I would basically say you don't really know. You're trying so much harder with somebody, and the outcome you want is to have a peaceful connection and to feel safe, and you're actually pushing that away. But I think the one thing that really got me, and this was years ago, a book called The Nice Factor, really old book, and I didn't read the whole thing. I probably only read the first chapter, and I wanted to be a nice person, and then this book was saying, do you know what people think of nice people? I mean, like, you can just do a little thought experiment now. We probably all know someone who's overly nice, you know, who's another people pleaser. And when you reflect on it, you know, what it's like to be around them, you can feel a bit sort of claustrophobic or a little bit manipulated and controlled, you know, and you have ways of not really wanting, it's not genuine. It's just not a genuine relationship. So yeah, and that is really because you're not being genuine with yourself. It's because you still have this script going. So, you know, it's really good to do a bit of script hunting. Okay, I had this people pleasing moment. Why? You know, what was I saying to myself? Because I think a lot of it comes down to our identity. If you want to change as a person, you have to see yourself as a different person. There's no way around it. You can do all the mantras and everything and affirmations, but really, until you say, I no longer identify as that kind of person, I think it's just always going to keep appearing. So yeah, listen to what's going on in your head and who you think you are in order to say those things in your head.
Yeah. I love that. And it just, it highlights the fact that this is such a unique journey for each person. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we're not going to get into the how of trying to break this too much, because you gave like some good first steps there. And for me, one of the things that I work with the women in my program on is that we start to identify where that pattern came from and why does it keep showing up in your life. And so I'm excited that we get to offer them a tool that you have put together, which we'll drop in the comments, and you give them a guide to get them started, which is really, really powerful and so generous of you to provide that for anyone that's listening. And I also want to encourage people that if you have questions, if you want to have a further conversation, you can reach out to either of us. We don't want to leave you alone with this. And Catherine, do you offer some, you know, like mini consultation sessions where they can have a conversation with you?
Actually, in the toolkit, if you want to download the toolkit, there'll be a link. There's a 10-minute video, and alongside that is a small worksheet. It's only 2 pages, but at the bottom of that worksheet is a clickable link to my calendar. So you can have half an hour free just to explore what came up for you when you've done that. And then there's one other little goodie thrown into the toolkit as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I just know that women are going to really resonate with what we talked about today. And I just love that we get to be on this journey together.
Yeah, I know. This is a powerful conversation because we don't want other people telling us that we're like this. But if we can be honest with ourselves, then we are taking back our power. That is our own authority to say, I'm in charge of this now and I want to make a change. And that's the only time it's going to happen is when you want to do it. So I'm so grateful to everyone for listening, because this is actually time for you. Like, even listening to this video is taking time for you. Thank goodness, you know.
Yes.
Step one. Brilliant.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for joining me. And I am going to say goodbye.
Bye.